visiting officials. So first off, I'd like to have, the Resources and Development Committee, delegates please introduce themselves. So I'd like to start with Vice Chair Honorable Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Brenda Seuss. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us today, everybody here in person, also everybody that's on call as well. Good morning, out there, Bennett, Shay, Casey Johnson is here. My day, I represent Cameron, Coal Mine, Loop, Bonnie Lake, and Bird Spring chapters within District 3 and 5. Well, those are the districts and chapter communities I'm representing here today, as well as the Great Navajo Nation. I want to go ahead and thank you for being on the call with us today, and I continue to do my best serving the Great Navajo Nation, the next citizens.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Honorable Johnson. Next, I'd like to go ahead and take it to Honorable Shauna Claw.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Vice Chair Johnson. I want to say good morning to everybody on the line with us, our legislative staff, our legislative council, honorable colleagues of Resources Development Committee, as well as our honorable colleagues that are on the line. My name is Shauna Ann Claw. And I serve the community of Chinle. And I also want to just say happy birthday to my son, who is a U.S. Airman serving in Anchorage, Alaska. Today's his birthday, so I just want to say happy birthday, Shiaj. Thank you, Madam Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Honorable Claw, and again, happy birthday and many blessings to your son.
Likewise.
Honorable Danny Simpson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Bennett, say Danny Simpson. Nashkari, Naharatni, Nashkado, Nenstini, Twitch in Simbashi, Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Simpson, and I'd like to take it to Honorable Rick Nez, Shnatani.
Bene Reknez and Shiawasan and Snow Zetwachin, Bashis Chin, Senabas, Chedo, Kia Ani, National Hokkait, and then Steno Congo chapters, Monash, Nashige, Hogback, San Juan, and Hanzara for Fulham, Burnham, and Nicom. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Nez. And we do have Honorable Ottoso, who is excused. So I'd like to go ahead and have my colleague, Honorable Crotty, introduction.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Shade, I appreciate the time and the energy of Resource and Development Committee members. Appreciate Siaj for the prayer. Kia ani nesledo Viking people, Bashis Chin, Destiny, Deshachedo, Irish people, the Chanole, Shay, Amber, Kidden, Zakrati, Yanisha, Tolha Toy, the Nutsha. So I come from the Foster and Bryant family along the Narbona Pass. And so once you hit that beautiful kind of peak there, we have our extended relatives along both sides. So we bring you greetings today, and I appreciate the time and energy of this committee. And it's good to see Mayaja, our legal counsel, here with us today. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shadeja, Honorable Karate. Next, I'd like to go ahead and take it to Legislative Services staff, Mr. Tahi and Mr. Mose.
Good morning, Madam Chair, those present, those online. My name is Raji Tahi. I'm the Legislative Advisor for Resource and Development Committee. I'm Kia Ani and Centric Kenneth, and I'm originally from Steamboat, Arizona. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Mose.
Good, Madam Chair, everybody online. Chair, let him know the chef, then I shot my question. Well, I'm not the Bashi, I see that you put on us now. Welcome, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mose, and Do Shamba, Ms. Khan, our legal counsel.
Morning. Yeah, it's honorable. توهيت ليني نشين بتأني باششين باششي داشتشي سنة كنا أي داشن مالا أكو تاوس فنشنا Ariana Khan dashitchي. With the Office of Legislative Counsel, here into the meeting, I'm ready for any questions. Thank you.
Of course, Shaha, Ms. Khan, and I'd like to take it to, I'd like to have Mr. Warren Roan, with, Navajo Nation EPA. Introduce yourself, *6 to unmute, Mr. Roan.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Resources Committee. Yad Bene, Shea Warren Roan, Unishka, Takabahan Shle, Kanagani Bashishin, Twitchini, Dashache, the Bethlehem, Dashanale. I work for Navajo EPA Waste Regulatory Compliance Department. Thank you. And good morning.
Next, I'd like to go ahead and take it to Ms. Cheryl Curley with BIA. Introduction.
Yat Bene, Chairwoman Jesus, RDC members, Navajo Nation leadership, my name is Cheryl Curley. I work for BIA Navajo Region, Office of Tribal Government Services. Thank you for having me on this call.
Ms. Curley, Mr. Calvin Castillo, Division of Community Development.
Good morning. Thank you, Honorable Chair Jesus. Good morning, Honorable Community Development Committee. My name is Calvin Castillo. Twitchin Schlino, Patani Bashishin. Kachinis are my chays and Ezefane are my nellies. Thank you.
Mr. Castillo. I'd like to take it next to Mr. Tico Charlie.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the Committee of the RDC. My name is Tico Charlie, and I'm the Executive Director for the Navajo Nation Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. Thank you.
Mr. Charlie. I'd like to take it to Ms. Dardis Watchman, *6 to unmute.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. This is Dareth. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can.
Oh, good. I'm on my computer. My name is Dareth Watchman Moore, to the members of the Resources and Development Committee, yourself, Madam Chair, to those listening on the call. I serve as the trustee for the Phase 2 Trust regarding abandoned uranium mine investigations and cleanup, and I've been doing this work since 2017. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Watchman. Next, I'd like to take it to Ms. Shelby Daisy with EPA.
Good morning, honorable members of the RDC. Yet Binish A Shelby Daisy Inishe Totochitni Nishle Totochitni Bashishchi Kia Ani Dashache Lakaidane Dashanele. Good morning, everyone. My name is Shelby Daisy. I'm a remedial project manager for Navajo EPA, and I'll be listening in on today's call. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Daisy. Next, I'd like to take it to Shania, Mr. Wilson Stewart Jr. *6 to unmute.
Good morning, Deja, Chairwoman, Aaron, the Vice Chair, Mr. Johnson, Aaron, the Resource Development Committee members, Shanado, Shadan, Liniginan, Aaron, the Shatlam Ash, Aaron, the Mr. Simpson, and Aaron Shamamas Khan, Aaron divisions, those departments. It's good to hear all your voices this morning. Anita Shadej, Wilson C. Stewart Jr., Aaron Office of President, Banash, for Defiance Agency Representative, Aro Kode, RDC, Beketna, National Need, Ko Ebina, a Ket had a shot or less, Aro Putsoni, Ainshle, Nanesh Edutachini, a Bashichin, Touching the Shachedo, be between the Shadella. Console, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Shania, Mr. Stewart, Adon Linigi. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and have recognized those guests as well as honorable members of Resources and Development Committee in the 25th Navajo Nation Council. Next, I'd like to go ahead and take it to item 3 on the agenda, reviewing and approving the agenda. So if I could have Mr. Tahi read the proposed agenda into the record.
Madam Chair, members of RDC, the Resource and Development Committee of the 25th Navajo Nation Council's regular meeting for Wednesday, April 12, 2023 at 10 a.m. Presiding Honorable Brent Jesus, Chairperson. Honorable Casey Allen Johnson, Vice Chairperson. Location Navajo Nation Land Department and via telecommunications. 1. Call meeting to order. Roll call invocation announcement. 2. Recognizing guests and visiting officials. 3. Reviewing and approving the agenda. 4. Reviewing and approving the journal, April 5th, 2023 regular meeting. 5. Receiving report. A. Report from the Waste Regulatory Compliance Department on the second phase 2 trust. Presenter Warren Rowan, Department Manager, Waste Regulatory Compliance Department, Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. 6. Old business, none. 7. New business. A, legislation 0047-23, and action relating to resource and economic development and Navigate committees, confirming the appointment of Tico Charlie as Executive Director for the Office of Navajo Telecommunication Regulatory Commission. B, legislation 0048-23, and action relating to resource and development and Navigate committees and the Navajo Nation Council, approving the appointment of Calvin Castillo as Division Director for the Navajo Nation Division of Community Development. C, legislation 0055-23, and action relating to resource and development and Navigate committees and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming the appointment of Stephen B. S. City as Executive Director of the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency. D, legislation number 0061-23, and action relating to Resource and Development Committee, Navigate Committee, and the Navajo Nation Council, confirming Walter Mike Colonna as the Navajo Nation Division of Natural Resources Executive Director. E, legislation 0052-23, and act relating to law and order, resource and development, and Navigate committees, and Navajo Nation Council, amending 2 NNC Section 104 and 11 NNC Section 8B to prohibit council delegates from serving as board members and shareholder representatives for Navajo Nation-owned instrumentalities. F, approving a work session with the Waste Regulatory and Compliance Department for Friday, April 28, 2023 at 9 a.m. in Windrock, Arizona area to discuss the Phase 2 trust. 8, and close the meeting announcements and adjournments. Madam Chair, members of RDC, that is the proposed agenda read into the record. Back to you.
Mr. Tahi. So members of Resources and Development Committee, may I get a motion? Vice Chair Johnson. Thank you, and may I get a second? Honorable Simpson. Members of Resources and Development Committee, do we have any additions to the agenda at this point?
Madam Chair, this is Shauna Claw, request to speak.
Okay, can I give it? Honorable Claw, you have the floor.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I have a proposed amendment to add on legislation 0050-23, which is sponsored by Honorable Delegate Mr. Seth Damon, and it is regarding the summer employment appropriations. If we could add that to our agenda, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
So, honorable members of Resources and Development Committee, we do have amendment number 1 to add legislation number 0050-23, motion by Honorable Shauna Claw. May I get a second? Honorable Vice Chair Johnson. Okay, may we have a discussion on Amendment 1? Mr. Tahi?
Madam Chair, members of RDC, in addition to legislation number 0050, may I recommend that we add it to amendment number 1, legislation 0058 and 0059, as they are ready to be added to RDC's agenda for further action.
Mr. Tahi. With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, there was a request to add to amendment number 1, legislation number 0058-23 and legislation number 0059-23. Going back to the motioning party, Honorable Claw, would you accept the additions to two legislations to amendment number 1 that you have motioned? Honorable Claw?
Madam Chair, I concur. Madam Chair, I concur.
And then also, seconding party, Vice Chair Johnson, you concur. Thank you. So with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we do have amendment number 1 to add legislations 0050-23, legislation number 0058-23, and legislation number 0059-23. So with that, members of Resources Development Committee, we do have a motion, and we do have a second on this. Any other discussion on amendment number 1? With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, I'd like to go ahead and go to roll call vote for amendment number 1. Honorable Shauna Claw, how do you vote?
I vote green, Madam Chair.
And then Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote, sir?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Danny Simpson, how do you vote, sir?
Green, Madam Chair.
And then Honorable Octoso is excused. So with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and Chair not voting on amendment number 1. Any other discussions on the agenda for today's Resources and Development Committee meeting, members of Resources and Development Committee? Going twice? Going 3 times. With that, members of RDC, I'd like to go ahead and call for a roll call vote. Honorable Shauna Claw, how do you vote?
I vote green, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote, sir?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Simpson, how do you vote, sir?
Green, Madam Chair.
With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we do have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and Chair not voting. Motion carries for the approved agenda for Resources Development Committee meeting for April 12, 2023. Going on to item number 4, reviewing and approving the journal for the April 5th, 2023 regular meeting. Members of Resources and Development Committee, the journal was emailed out by Legislative Services team. So if I may get a motion on the journals for April 5th regular meeting. Vice Chair Johnson, and may I get a second?
Second.
Honorable Simpson, second. With that, Resources and Development Committee members, do we have any questions or comments on the journals for the April 5th, 2023 regular RDC meeting? Going once? Going twice? Okay, I'd like to go ahead and call for a roll call vote. Honorable Claw, how do you vote, ma'am? Honorable Claw?
I vote green, Madam Chair.
Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Nez, how do you vote?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Agree, Madam Chair.
Yeah. With that, members of Resources Development Committee, we have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and chair not voting. So motion carries. Going on to item number 5 of the agenda, receiving report.
Madam Chair.
Honorable Danny Simpson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the RDC and staff, and Delegate Crowley, Delegate on the line. Good afternoon. Morning, conditions. I'm looking at the agenda and what we accepted, and I think it's always out of courtesy to honor our colleagues who do have other work they have to attend to. And I'm looking at the agenda. Most of the items in new business are sponsored by RDC members. And we have one colleague here. I know she gets pretty busy, so I'd like to motion to suspend the full rules and to go to item E, legislation 005223. We do have Madam Delegate Crowley here to sponsor legislation. Motion to stay. Then we'll go back to report.
Okay. Honorable members of Resources and Development Committee, there was a request to suspend the floor rules by Honorable Danny Simpson in regards to having item number 7, new business letter E, legislation number 0052-23, be an item that we can take care of before we go to receiving reports, and it was motioned by Honorable Danny Simpson. If I may get a second on this request. Vice Chair Johnson, thank you. So with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, do I take a vote? Okay, I'd like to go ahead and, do we have any discussion on the proposed request that was made by Honorable Simpson, members of RDC? Going twice, going 3 times. With that, members of RDC, I'd like to go ahead and do a roll call vote. Honorable Shauna Claw, how do you vote on the legislation 7E to be taken care of before receiving reports? Honorable Claw? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to Vice Chair Johnson. How do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Simpson votes green. And Honorable Shauna Claw. Now, Tani, how do you vote? Okay, with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, there is 3 in favor, 0 opposed, and chair not voting. Motion carries to hear item 7, new business letter E, legislation number 0052-23. Before receiving reports, and Mr. Tahi, if I can have you read the legislation number into the record.
Madam Chair, members of RDC, you have a legislative summary sheet for tracking number 0052-23, date March 31st, 2023, titled the Resolution and Act relating to Law and Order, Resource and Development, and Update Committees, and the Navajo Nation Council amending to NNC Section 104 and 11, NNC Section 8B to prohibit council delegates from serving as board members and stakeholder representatives for the Navajo Nation-owned instrumentally. Proposed purpose, this resolution, if approved, will prohibit council delegates from serving on the governing boards, management committees, and commissions of any Navajo Nation-owned instrumentally, and from serving as shareholder representatives or member representatives to any Navajo Nation-owned instrumentalities. Navajo Nation Council has final authority over this legislation, which will be read into the record in its entirety. The primary sponsor for this legislation is Honorable Amber Kidman-Crotty, co-sponsor Honorable Seth Damon, for tracking number 0052-23, an act relating to law and order, resource and development, and upkeep committees, and the Navajo Nation Council amending 2 NC Section 104 and Section 11 in NC Section 8B to prohibit Navajo council delegates from serving as board members and shareholders, representatives for the Navajo-owned instruments disease. Section 1 outlines the authorities, and Section 2 the findings. Section 3 is amending it, 2 in NC Section 104. The Navajo Nation Council hereby amends 2 in NC Section 4 as follows. Then it amends Title 11, which is Navajo Nation hereby amends the election code of 11 in NC Section 8B. And you have Section 5 with the effective date and the directive, Section 6 the codification, and Section 6 the savings clause. Attached is the first report from the Navajo Nation Legislative Branch and their public summary for legislation number 0052-23. Primary sponsors, Honorable Amber Kidman-Crotty. This legislation was posted on April 4, 2023 at 7:56 p.m. The 5-day comment period ended April 9, 2023. There was no comment supporting this legislation, no comments opposing this legislation, no comments recommendation on this legislation. Then you have the Law and Order, the 25th Navajo Nation Council Committee Report. The committee report is due passed with no amendment, and the legislation was referred to the Resource and Development Committee. The vote tally reads as 2 in favor, 0 opposed, and 3 not voting. Chair members of RDC, that is legislation number 0052-23 read into the record. Back to Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Tahi. Members of RDC, may I get a motion on legislation number 0052-23? Honorable Simpson? May I get a second, members of RDC? Vice Chair Johnson? At this time, I'd like to go ahead and allow the sponsor, Honorable Crotty, to speak to legislation number 0052-23.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And you have 20 minutes, Shananta.
Okay. I'll try to keep it brief. I appreciate the committee. I'll refer to legislation, so on page 2, line 4, it does state that the Navajo Nation Council is the governing body of the Navajo Nation and is responsible for the enactment and establishment of Navajo Nation law and policy as per Title II, Section 102A and 164A. And with that is the finding sections where you can look and we have identified in the Navajo Ethics in Government Law, which is also Title II, Section 371 or 3741. It includes a general prohibition that public officials and employees of the Navajo Nation avoid any action, whether or not specifically by the standards of conduct, as in Resolution ER 308001, which could result in or create an appearance of adversely affecting the confidence of the people in the integrity of the government of the Navajo Nation, or Title II, Section 3745B and 6. The law also includes specific prohibitions that elected officials shall not have direct or indirect financial or other economic interest, nor engage in such other employment or economic activities which necessarily involve inherent substantial conflict or appears to have such substantial conflict with their responsibilities and duties as public officials of the Navajo Nation. According to Title II, Section 3747A, against incompatible interest or employment. And so due to this potential for conflicts of interest, the Navajo Nation Code specifically prohibits council delegates from serving as elected officials of the federal or state government, being employees of the federal or state government, or engaging in private practice of law, or serving simultaneously as a school board member while serving as a delegate. In addition, multiple duties arise to create conflicts when elected officials hold other governmental or non-governmental positions that impose duties upon the elected official in their other roles. Members of have duties to the entity or they serve on. A member who is also an elected official should refrain from actions involving that entity while performing functions as an elected official. Elected officials shall not participate or vote on any entity of which the elected official is a member by virtue of his or her status as an elected official according to the resolution. And so we do have in our laws under statutory plans of operation, articles of incorporation, operating agreements, corporate charters, and our bylaws. Council delegates may, by virtue of serving as a member of the Navajo Nation Council, be appointed to boards like NQA, like Diné College, commissions or management committees governing specific Navajo Nation-owned enterprises, companies, corporations. Under the statutory plan of operation, council delegates may also be appointed as shareholder representatives to specific Navajo-owned instrumentalities. The Navajo or the Ethics in Government Law expressly states that it is the intention of the Navajo Nation Council that the provisions of this Navajo Nation Ethics in Government Law be construed and applied in each instance so as to accomplish its purpose of protecting the Navajo people from government decisions and actions resulting from or affected by undue influences or conflicts of interest. I'll end, Madam Chair, by saying that the duties and responsibilities of the Navajo Nation Council delegate should be limited to appropriations and establishing the laws and policies for the Navajo Nation. Council delegates should not serve on governing boards, management committees, or commissions of any Navajo Nation-owned instrumentality. Am I saying? Okay, that's a strange word. Council delegates should not serve as shareholder representatives or member representatives to any Navajo Nation-owned instrumentality. Madam Chair, that is the legislation at this point. And have had in the past conflicts arise with enterprises and shareholder representatives. I believe in 2014, there was a number of council delegates who sat on the Navajo Nation oil and gas shareholder as representatives and actually took the company to federal court. So it has arisen to that level where a shareholder representative and the enterprise could have a possible conflict. And as recently we have seen where the bylaws of the enterprise might say one annual meeting for the shareholder rep, but we have seen that they hold, the board president will host a number of meetings for the shareholder representatives. And the possible conflict here is majority, if not all of those shareholder representative or board positions have a stipend attached. And that a stipend is part of the enterprise's bylaws. And so as you have these multiple meetings, then the individual shareholder has the benefit of receiving those multiple stipends or travel paid for. And so that is the concern when it comes to conflict. What we would want to do is, like oversight committees as yourself, is to hear from the enterprises, ask the questions, and then be able to provide what potentially those shareholder positions would, how they would provide that fiduciary responsibility. But this is the first step to start having that conversation, and I'm open for any questions, recommendations, or how we could move forward with this committee who has oversight over all of the enterprises, over NQA and as Navajo Council delegates, we have oversight over Sinet College, who has a delegate on their board. Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Karate, for elaborating on the intent of this legislation that is here before us. So, Resources and Development Committee members, we had Honorable Karate pretty much illustrate the purpose of why this legislation is here before Resources and Development Committee here this morning. And as we all may know now, that all of the enterprises to the Navajo Nation is under the oversight of Resources and Development Committee. So with that, members of RDC, do we have any questions and or recommendations on this particular legislation number 0052-23? Honorable Vice Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions regarding this legislation. First one is, has there been any discussion, dialogue, or work session with the 25th Navajo Nation Council regarding this legislation prior to this being dropped? Second question, have you consulted with the enterprises of the Navajo Nation prior to dropping this legislation? In any work sessions or meetings or discussions with any of the enterprises or that is stated in this legislation? My two questions.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Johnson. So I'd like to go ahead and give it back to the sponsor, Honorable Karate, in regards to Honorable Vice Chair Johnson regarding consultation with the 25th Navajo Nation Council and consultation with the enterprises.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair Johnson, for the question. So the discussion with the 25th Navajo Nation Council, during the orientation, there was limited time in terms of hearing from the different enterprises and the roles and responsibilities of appointments to the board or to the enterprises as shareholder representatives. But the leadership orientation on Sunday, March 26th, there was, I believe on the agenda was Legislative Counsel, Ms. Barbara, gave an overview to the 25th Council regarding the role of shareholder representatives. So those are two places where I can, in terms of the discussion with the 25th Navajo Nation Council, this legislation is actually that opportunity for the council as it moves forward through the different committees to have that discussion and recommendations. In addition, in terms of consulting with the enterprises, since the focus is on the Navajo ethics in government law and how we're bound by that law as council delegates, I have not consulted with the enterprises because we're actually at the point now where the enterprises have not taken the ethics law seriously enough, and where I'm looking to possible future areas where enterprises should be held liable when they're engaging in activities that go against our government law and policy.
Thank you, Honorable Karate. Vice Chair Johnson, does that clarify your question?
Yes.
Yes.
Honorable Carter.
Thank you. Any other members of Resources and Development Committee? Honorable Simpson, you do have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of RDC, Madam Delegate, probably for sponsors of legislation. A couple of questions here. It goes back to, go page 46. And it goes, no council shall serve as a shareholder representative. Going back to Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, the way it's structured, owned by Navajo Nation, it does have a it does have to have a, shareholders representative. And the way it's structured, and I think to me, since Navajo Nation owns that enterprise, that's how it was established to where council delegate would be shareholders because it belongs to the Navajo Nation. So, yes, who are going to be the shareholders now for the shareholder representatives for this does pass? How's that going to be structured? Because again, Navajo Nation owns that enterprise. It's structured. It has to have representatives. I still think the council should be represented, but with no stipend or mileage. I mean, that would be probably a way to do it, so we don't have to really make changes to the enterprise plan operation. That would probably be a way to do it. I think a lot has to do with compensation and reimbursement. That's one question, how are we going to take care of that? That would be my recommendation. The second, you're talking about, I think, Con here can answer this question. This is Con on, campaign 46, which includes all Navajo Nation-owned enterprises, companies, corporations. I understand that part. Authorities. When we say authorities and entities, I don't see the definition page on what we're talking about, authorities and entities. So maybe you can give us a definition of what we're talking about, authorities and entities. That'll be my second question to Mr. Khan. The third one would be when you say commission, kind of goes back to authorities and entities. And if you look at, I don't know if we're talking about Navajo Hopi Land Commission, they have been very instrumental in addressing the issues they face every single day. I hope we're not talking about the commission, Navajo Hopi Land Commission. I kind of see that maybe that's under authorities and entities. That's the thing I'm concerned about, that these delegates have been very instrumental in trying to address the issues they're facing. Going back to Eastern Land Commission, same thing again. That's where 5 delegates serve on there, plus one president, who's appointed by the president, so 6 members. And we had done a lot to address these land issues with complicated land statuses within Eastern Agency. So I hope we're not talking about that to do away with the Eastern Land Commission and have a delegate. Because when we talk about Eastern Land Commission and being a delegate, it goes back to government to government. We have done a lot working with congressional people and administration in Washington, D.C. And I'll go to an example. When a standing committee under Navajo Nation Council goes up there, that conversation starts. We go to NAPI now. NAPI, congressional people don't want to talk to NAPI. It's not government to government. Now, we speak on behalf of NAPI, it will be probably RDC or the president of Navajo Nation that will be government to government. So that's where my concern is, that the Navajo Nation Eastern Land Commission, Navajo Hopi Land Commission was established, so it will be government to government, where teams can be heard. So again, this is basically pertaining to those 2 commissions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, Honorable Simpson for posing those questions. I'm going to go ahead and give it first to Honorable Crotty in regards to the recommendation that was made, because I believe it was mentioned by Honorable Simpson that compensation is a big issue here, whether if the consideration of no stipends or no mileage will be considered, and then also to our legal counsel, Ms. Khan, in regards to amendments to a lot of these plan of operations that is stipulated under Title II of the Navajo Nation Code. So, Honorable Crotty?
I appreciate those recommendations, Sheriff Delegate Simpson. Could work together on developing that language regarding the no stipend and the no mileage. Because that is part of the conflict, and because what the enterprises have done in the past will use their shareholder representatives as their lobbying arm on councils. That's clear as how legislations are sponsored and how legislations move through the process. And as I mentioned, the federal court case when it came to oil and gas, I think we should brief as a council what has been the history with shareholder representatives if it's just the last decade. What have we learned and what can we move forward on? In 2015, I was on the council and we received a great presentation on shareholder representative roles and responsibilities. This was specifically to Navajo Nation oil and gas because of those legal challenges. And Mr. Lee Bergen with Bergen Law Offices, working through the Office of Legislative Counsel, provided that overview. And it's a beautiful document. And we could ask as this committee or as this council to receive that training on what does it mean to be a shareholder representative. Because right now, what the enterprises do is they will confine and limit shareholder representatives. And what we've seen is legal questions from shareholder representatives saying, can I provide this information to, and the enterprise will say it's confidential, and not share it with the council that was given to you as your role as a shareholder representative. So those are areas that we can work with our legislative council on how we can move forward. And I just wanted to clarify, there's some additional besides, but I agree with the stipends and the mileage if we want to go into maybe like phasing this in. In terms of the definitions of I could defer to Ms. Khan for authorities, entities. The intent is not to prohibit or to dismantle the Eastern Land Commission or the Navajo Hopi Commission, because the language in here says Commission of a Navajo-owned instrumentality. So the intent, and if we have to change that language, I would need the help of this committee with that amendment, because that would just be back to a business or to an enterprise. And the distinction between Eastern Land Board and Navajo Hopi is their budget is in the Navajo Nation Council. So every year we're budgeting for the needs of that commission. That's a different aspect from the boards and the shareholder reps that's specific. I appreciate the questions, and if I could defer for the definition.
Let me just give it to Con. Vice Chair Johnson?
I'd like to make a request. Chief Counsel Dana on the call.
Ms. Dana Barba?
Yes, this is Dana. I'm listening in. I'm also on another call, so a little delayed in my response. But yes, I'm listening and can take questions.
Okay, so Dana, there was a question here that was posed, and let me go ahead and have Ms. Khan. There was a question in regards to the Navajo Hopi Land Commission and Eastern Navajo Land Commission in regards to the intent and purpose of the commissions under the 25th Navajo Nation Council, where majority of the commission members are on the present council right now. But in regards to this particular legislation, 005223, the provisions, the language provision in this particular legislation, not having Navajo Nation Council delegates serve as shareholder reps on governing boards or management committee or commission of any Navajo Nation-owned instrumentality. So in regards to that, I guess what the question here is, we just need legal opinion in regards to how can a smooth transition happen with regards to this legislation. There was a request to include provision of no stipend or no mileage should council delegates serve on these enterprises and or commission. So I'm hoping that I clarified that correctly. So Ms. Khan, I don't know if you want to go ahead and take it or just go ahead and defer this to Dana.
Madam Chair, with regard to language that is that is underlined in in the legislation, and the underlined language, of course, means that this is new language to be added, in this case, to two sections of the code. Title II, regard to the legislative branch and Navajo Nation Council meetings, and in the second place, to be added to the code, Title II, election. In listening to the conversation here and the questions that are raised, the question, Ms. Bobroff, is definitions of the terms, especially with regard to the term instrumentality and also the term entities. And both of those two terms are used in the proposed amendment to Title II and Title 11, the election code. And the concern is that the Navajo Nation delegates who are on the Eastern Navajo Land Commission, the Navajo Hopi Land Commission, and there's one more here, let me see. The Navajo-Utah Commission, whether those terms are, the term instrumentality and entity would also include those three commissions on which Navajo Nation Council members currently may have a position on those particular commissions. I hesitate drafting up an amendment with regard to those particular, the definition of instrumentality or entity, and also to specifically exempt the three I mentioned. I think that language needs to be crafted very carefully, and it probably won't be very long, but I don't want to craft it right now. Unless you are ready to craft that language, I would request that resource such an amendment, but that it be provided at Nabik EFC. Madam Chair, that's my.
Thank you, Mariana. I cannot, because I'm on another call, balancing calls, I cannot pull up the legislation, but since I did draft it, I can certainly speak to it. For starters, the Navajo Hopi Land Commission, the Eastern Land Commission, the Navajo-Utah Commission are absolutely 100% not included in this legislation. It does not affect them. They are not instrumentalities. So, and I think that Delegate Karate did a really good distinction when she was talking about where the budgets come from. I think I didn't even think of using that as part of the explanation. This legislation is applying to the Navajo Nation's enterprises, its corporations, its companies, its authorities. And for example, Navajo Tribal Utility Authority. They don't call themselves an enterprise, they call themselves an authority. So the nation owns enterprises, corporations, companies, authorities, and there's lots of different terminology. So basically the distinction is if they're operating for outside of the Navajo Nation government, still owned by the government, but they operate outside. I would recommend to Ms. Khan to craft an amendment, since there seems to be delegates who are uncomfortable. Craft an amendment just to very specifically declare that the Navajo Hopi Land Commission, the Eastern Land Commission, and Navajo-Utah Commission are not included in this. And none of those commissions have board members or shareholders representatives. That would be nonsensical. But I agree, certainly, Ms. Khan, you can craft an amendment to specifically include those. As far as using the term instrumentalities, as you will look up, and as I said, I don't have the legislation in front of me, so Ms. Khan will need to point out the specific line, but instrumentalities is used to subsume to describe as one term instead of in every line listing enterprises, companies, corporations, authorities. And it is defined there. The other question is whether we could also, I guess, include a provision saying that delegates cannot accept stipends or travel expenses from the enterprises or corporations, etc. You could certainly include that. It seems as if they're not shareholders representatives and they're not sitting on boards or management commissions, that there wouldn't be any reason that they would be receiving stipends or mileage, but you can certainly do an emphasis by amending that. The other thing is, the reason the word commission is even in there is because one of the, and I think it is NHA, and I might be wrong, it might be NTUA, but I think it's NHA. Instead of having a board of directors, they have a board of commissioners. So instead of having a board, they actually have a commission. But that's very different from, say, Eastern Land Commission. So I think that captured all the questions I heard. I will let Ms. Khan catch up anything I didn't. And the other thing that to be considered, most definitely bylaws, charters, those types of documents will need to be amended, and I think there is a directive towards the end of the legislation that speaks to that. The Navajo Council cannot amend all of those documents because they are actually documents that are approved by the boards. One of the things that the council committees may want to consider is that if you go back, most of, and I want to say all, but I might have missed one, but most of the instrumentalities that have shareholders representatives appointed to them, they don't actually say that it has to be a council delegate representative. What it says is, for example, that the Resources and Development Committee will appoint a shareholders representative. It does not say that shareholders representative has to be a council delegate. So there are some other options. You could, if it was a decision of the council or the committee, you could appoint a non-delegate to be the shareholders representative. So that is an option, and I agree with Delegate Crotty that there's more discussions to follow on this. But there are some options, and so I will need to turn the microphone back to Ms. Khan. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Ms. Khan?
Dana, Ms. Barbara, I'm fashioning the exemption language with regard to the three commissions: Eastern Navajo Land Commission, Navajo Hopi Land Commission, Navajo Utah Commission, and with inserting it after, essentially saying the Navajo Hopi Land Commission, the Eastern Land Commission, and Navajo Utah Commission are excluded from this provision, and putting that language after the amendments that are entitled to, that are the focus of this legislation. That is the extent of the amendment that I'm doing with regard to excluding those three commissions. With regard to, amending the legislation such that no compensation or stipend be paid, I do believe that would require a whole separate section, with regard, if there is going to be, a phasing in of this particular amendment to Title II and Title 11, because it assumes that the Navajo Nation Council will still be sitting on those, on the shareholder, representative positions and such. So, I'm not, unless I get further direction as to how this legislation will be phased in, I hesitate going and providing that, amendment language at this time. Unless I have particular times and more information to fill out a whole section, a new section 5 with regard to the phasing in of. Barbara, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Honorable Vice Chair Johnson?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Khan, and, Dana, for your, response. Let's go ahead and include all the subcommittees. Our recommendations include all subcommittees, subcommittees, or whatever else is out there on this list as well. And, also, I would like to see all the enterprises, all the companies, everything that is. Let's be clear on this legislation on who's all be affected by this legislation. Council stated that charters will be affected. That needs more discussion, more time, work sessions, dialogue, Navajo Nation Council, Chief Council, as well as the enterprises and the Navajo Nation companies will be affected by this. And the boards and the charters. Thank you.
Yeah, Honorable, Simpson, Vice Chair Johnson, I'm sorry, apologize. I'd like to go ahead and take it to my honorable colleague, Mr. Rick Nez. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, honorable members of the Resource and Development Committee, and Honorable Chair Crotty, legislation 0052-23. The addition and I was the shareholder representative for Intech for 4 years. During that time, we only met like twice a year. They provided a report to us. We shared information, and they sent out newsletters and things like that, which were labeled NDA, non-disclosure agreements. And they do have stipends available for them. And but for Intech, it's just right here in my backyard. 4 of my chapters, Burnham, Upper Fulton, and Hamza, San Juan. It's right in the middle of it. These shareholders, then you get old board members behind. Although I was on the Hospitality Enterprise Board with Honorable Otto So. When the Shiprock Hotel project came before the council for approval, I could not speak to the issue. I had to recuse myself. I couldn't even vote red or green. And this is how we dealt with these issues during the 24th council. We have Intech who has shareholders, and there's board members that they have as well. Navajo Nation Oil and Gas, they have shareholders and they have their own board members also. Adoneka, though, they have board members, but they don't have shareholders or anything like that. But what I've noticed with NECA was they had quite a few people that were former council delegates on there. Aronapi board ikiyaha asatananasha. But within NAPI board, there was a subcommittee called the NIP subcommittee, Navajo Indian Irrigation Project Subcommittee. I was on that board because it was just right here next to my neighborhood as well. And this was also budgeted by the Navajo Nation Council to be on this NIP subcommittee. A lot of the issues that we discussed pretty much were also related to what the board does. So NIP subcommittee, maybe we need to do away with that. Maybe we need to do away with some of these, like I was thinking about other subcommittees, gaming subcommittees, that one, RDC is pretty much the oversight over gaming casinos. And I like the idea of perhaps doing away with the stipends and the mileage, but rather continue the shareholders. Again, Navajo Nation, we represent the Navajo Nation in this way. Although NTOA has its own board members, but one member of council is usually on there. And I'm sure we can do away with that. As you all are aware, before you even became a delegate, I'm sure you always read in the front page of the newspapers about NHA. Even though they had their own board members, look at the condition that it's in. Maybe we have to look at all these enterprises, all these that we're going to be discussing, enterprises, corporations, companies, authorities, entities. Maybe that's what we need to do, is have a work session and look over each one of them. And maybe to also eliminate former delegates on serving on these boards if we decide to keep boards on there. Honorable Damon Sahazlan, when he was introducing the helium legislation, he was also a shareholder for NOG. And NOG helium akwagi nikananishidadi listan noban akwagi ayaba sa hodlon fadena shanand arnosenike. If you look at the Board of Commissioners for the Office of Navajo Government Development, on there you have chapter officials that serve on there. And they always put a stop to anything having to do with regionalization of chapters. What needs to happen with the chapters? Because they support receiving their stipends. So we need to look at all this as a council at Nabakiat. Perhaps that's what we'll do, is make a recommendation to have a work session over all these enterprises, entities, corporations, and look at their board members, their shareholders, their commissioners, the subcommittees, and maybe we don't need all that. I'm not asking a question, I'm just sharing my thoughts with you. And I think it would take a whole day to just have this work session. We can request it when this legislation comes before Nabikietke. and have it to where we're all there and talk about it, you know. So, thank you, and back to you, Chair. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Naz, for the recommendation. I'd like to go ahead and take it to my colleague, Honorable Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of RDC, gang. Going off what Ms. Delegate has stated, there's a lot of things that he stated, I concur on that. And goes back to RDC, a lot of these things that we're facing with these enterprises, RDC has a lot of oversight enterprises. We don't need members to serve on the boards and all that. And to me, I see as RDC committee make a lot of changes through being legislators here, to amending laws or amending their plan of operation. We can do a lot through amending laws and their plan of operation. That can be done. I always had a problem with that, where council members serve on these boards and hoping that they can make changes where they can advocate for these changes to the full council or the oversight committee. And we don't make amend laws at all to address these issues that come from these enterprises. Sometimes just go in there, say flexing our muscles, say we want this thing done. The way it's done is through amending laws or policies. The way it's done as legislators. And to me, once it's passed by the council, signed into law, and these enterprises will have to follow it. Go in there and just flex our muscles and say, I'm a delegate, I want this thing done. So I totally support Madam Delegate Crowley, your legislation. A little bit. Shareholder representative, I still think that needs to be in place how some of these entities are established. I think that needs to still be in place now. If we can come with the language to where there will be no compensation, or I think it's compensation stipend, but travel-wise, I think it's okay with me. I'll reimburse for mileage. That'd be okay with me, but stipends I have a problem with. And with the language that Ms. Khan came up with, the commission will be excluded. The Eastern Land Commission, the Utah and Navajo Land. I'd like to incorporate that, Madam Chair. I'd like to make that motion. Can we get that into a record? How it's going to be amended? And second of all, I'd like to see some language can become, some of these can be drafted. Shareholder representative to continue on the Navajo oil and gas and more entities you guys mentioned. And I can't remember those. That can be, delegates can serve as shareholder representatives. Fine with me, but I think just stipend payment with the language on that, I would appreciate that. But the first one, excluding the three commission, ready to record, Madam Chair. I'll make a motion after that.
Honorable Simpson, for the recommendation that was made. Again, members of Resources and Development Committee. So right now, the recommendation on the floor is to put some amendment to this legislation to add language provision to exclude the Navajo Utah Commission, the Navajo Hopi Land Commission, and the Eastern Navajo Land Commission from this particular directive per this legislation. And also, the recommendation here is to continue having the Navajo Nation delegate serve as a shareholder, but the language provision is to not accept stipends from the enterprises. Again, those provisions are to be made. And at this point, I believe that legal counsel, needs to draft a quantifiable amendment language provision, and for the reason being, the amendment won't be read into the record just yet, but be provided at the NABI meeting. That be okay, Mr. Tahi?
Members of RDC, let me get this straight, just for my clarification. You're asking Ms. Khan to draft amendment number 1 to add the additional entities into the legislation, but at NABI, you're asking for additional amendments as well?
No, that the amendment, provision to be, incorporated into this legislation will not be provided until NABI, provided that legal counsel, Ms. Khan, has to draft a quantifiable amendment provision language.
Madam Chair, members of RDC, Delegate Dennington submitted amendment number 1 to have that amendment read into the record. My understanding is now you want Ms. Khan to write, appropriate language to be incorporated during NABI. So my recommendation is that, Honorable Simpson withdraw the amendment that is currently made as the main motion, so Ms. Khan can work on that language to be drafted, for NABI committee for Thursday, April 13th, during NABI's regular meeting when this is on the agenda.
Let me take it to Ms. Khan. Ms. Khan, are we able to get the amendment provision going to exclude or exempt the 3, land commissions, under, the legislative branch?
Madam Chair, members of the Resources and Development Committee, I'm almost done with the amendment that Delegate Simpson has requested. And I just right now, if you just give me 5 minutes, 3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, so members of Resources Development Committee, I'd like to allow some time for legal counsel, Ms. Khan, to properly draft the amendment that was recommended here. Right now, I would like to, so he motioned it, huh?
Yes.
So the motion that was made by Honorable Simpson to add the amendment and read into the record, so may I get a second? Vice Chair Johnson. Okay, with that, members of Resources Development Committee, since we will be waiting on Mrs. Khan to finalize the amendment language provision, I'd like to go ahead and call for a 5-minute break. Recess for 5 minutes. Okay, good morning again, colleagues of Resources and Development Committee, and also, callers on the call, the Zoom call here this morning. So I'd like to go ahead and, restart or go back into the discussion on legislation number 0052-23. We did have a motion by Honorable Danny Simpson, a second by Vice Chair Johnson in regards to an amendment that was motioned to add, language provision regarding exemption of, Utah Commission, Navajo Hopi Land Commission, and Eastern Navajo Land Commission from this particular legislation. So at this point, we would like to, I'd like to go ahead and take it back to Honorable Simpson, since the language provision needs more, research so that a proper, language provision can be drafted by legal counsel with Office of Legislative Services. Honorable Danny Simpson, as a motioning party, are you, willing to withdraw this motion at this time? So the question is on the floor to you, Honorable Simpson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the RDC, and thank you, Madam Crowdy. Thank you for, work with RDC. Make this legislation stronger, and as I stated before, I do support your legislation. I think just some tweaking needs to be done, and at the meantime, our Ms. Hong with Legislative Council needs more time to draft up a really, where it'll be, beneficial to incorporate that into this, legislation. Later on down the road, we don't want to be saying, how was this, written up, this amendment, so we don't want to be hearing that. So with that, and, again, Madam Delegate Crowley, thank you so much that you're going to be working with RDC. And hopefully we can get this thing addressed, get this before the council very soon. So with that, Madam, Chair, I'd like to withdraw my, motion to amendment.
With that, Honorable Danny Simpson, withdraws his motion. Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, do you concur?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're back on the name.
Okay, so now, members of Resources and Development Committee, we are back on the main motion in regards to legislation 0052-23. And, I'd like to go ahead and give it to, Honorable Danny Simpson at this point.
Madam Chair, what I stated when I withdrew my motion, it still stands. Again, I'd like just want to say thank you so much to work with RDC to make this stronger and more clear. And I think clear probably just be about 10%, tweak 10%, 5% is really clear on this legislation. So we just need to work on that 10%. And so with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to table this. Madam Delegate, how many days?
Your schedule, when are you open? May 15th for work session?
Madam Chair, I'll say within 45 days. Okay, or 30 days.
Yeah, definitely.
I wanted to move
30
quickly.
days. Ms. Fahy, how is their schedule like for the month of May right now? I think I did, request to see if we can allow some days to be open for the members of Resources Development Committee to concentrate on issues related to the communities that they represent within their district. So I know that we don't have very much, work sessions scheduled for the month of May, but we do have the every Wednesday RDC meetings.
And try, I just say, okay, table this within 40 days, this will come back before RDC. Work with, Madam Delegate Crowley to tweak this, legislation, so it'll be within 45 days, so.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable, Simpson, for the recommendation. I'd like to go ahead and take it to our legal counsel, Ms. Khan, in regards to the request of the 45-day, period for, improving language provision in this legislation.
Madam Chair and members of the Resources and Development Committee, Title II, Section 164A11 states that if a committee is not final authority on the legislation and the committee tables the legislation goes on to the next committee. Will be heard, now. You may go ahead and table it, but that's what happens if the non-final committee.
Okay.
And then the committee, this committee, non-final authority committee, has the option of putting in the request for a work session on the issues that have been brought up. And now the EHIT committee is, other standing committees, it does have the authority to refer, does have more latitude to.
Excuse me, this is Dana. Can I chime in, please?
Yes, Dana, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Khan is absolutely correct in her in what she recited as far as Title II. However, the Office of Legislative Counsel will, within the next two weeks, be issuing a document which we call frequently asked questions, which is going to address situations like this tabling and other items that come up repeatedly at committees. But in the interim, what that memo or what that document will say is that tabling at a committee without final approval authority, that will move on to the next committee unless the speaker wishes to, the sponsor wishes to adhere to the tabling motion. So, and let me just state that another way. It will move on if the sponsor wishes it to. If the sponsor doesn't wish for it to move on to the next committee, it can stay at RDC. And we are working, we know there's been some inconsistencies in the past on the interpretation of rules, so we are trying to get something more solid in place. And when our document comes out, it will allow the sponsor, it all become in control of the sponsor. The sponsor can move the legislation to the next committee, or they can stay with the tabling motion. Thank you, Speaker. Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman and Women, and thank you, Ms. Khan.
Thank you, Dana, for that clarification. So with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, it is recommended that the Resources and Development Committee is not the final authority, although this legislation will be tabled at the RDC Committee, but it will move forward to NABI, which will be tomorrow. And at this point, it is in the Speaker's realm to look at considering tabling this legislation, provided that we have another day to discuss, just to have a work session collectively, not just with Resources and Development Committee, but with other committees of the Navajo, 25th Navajo Nation Council, to discuss this legislation and put amended, recommended language provisions into the legislation. So with that, this legislation was tabled by Honorable Danny Simpson, who had motioned. So I think that we know here as the next steps and how we're going to go with this legislation that in the future Resources and Development Committee will fully support, but provided that it just needs some language provisions of the amendments that were recommended. So with that, may I get a second on the motion by Honorable Simpson? Vice Chair Johnson. Okay. So now, members of RDC, I'd like to go ahead and call for roll call vote. Honorable Shawna, how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nez, how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Honorable So is excused. With that, members of Resources Development Committee, I do have a 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and Chair not voting. Motion carries. On to item 5 on the agenda, receiving report. And we have report from the Waste Regulatory and Compliance Department on the Phase 2 Trust. We do have presenter, Mr. Warren Roan, who is the Department Manager for the Waste Regulatory and Compliance Department, Navajo Nation Protection Agency. And I also believe that we have Darius Watchman, who is also the co-presenter on this particular report. So Mr. Roan and Ms. Watchman, you do have the floor, and you do have 20 minutes starting at 11:55 a.m.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Resources and Development Committee for taking time today to listen to our presentation. She'e Warren Roan Yinishka, Tkabaha and Shle, Hunagaki Bashachin, Tkwidijini Dashache, the Bethlehem Dashanale. I am the Environmental Department Manager at the Waste Regulatory Compliance Department at NABU EPA. I have with me today Ms. Darius Watchman Moore. She is the Phase 2 trustee. I also have Mr. Jeremy Beekes. He's a remedial project manager for the NABU EPA Superfund program. And he's assigned to the Phase 2 trust sites. And I also have Jill Grant, attorney at Jill Grant and Associates, and also Mr. City, Executive Director of NABU EPA, present as well. So we come before you today to brief you on the Phase 1 and Phase 2 AUM trust sites in regards to the transfer of funds from the Phase 1 to the Phase 2. So yesterday, the RDC did meet with members of the US EPA, and they did discuss funding on Navajo abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Nation. And part of the description included the Phase 1 and Phase 2, and how the Navajo Nation was about to pursue legal action against US EPA on the orphan mine sites on the Navajo Nation. However, US EPA did provide funding for the Phase 1 and the Phase 2. So with that, we're requesting transfer of funds from the Phase 1 to the Phase 2. So, and to further explain this, Ms. Darius Watchman Moore has prepared a PowerPoint presentation to orientate the honorable members of the Resources and Development Committee. So at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Darius Watchman Moore, Phase 2 trustee. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. This is Darius. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Oh, wow. Mr. Tahi, can you share the PowerPoint presentation? For some reason, my computer is locking up.
Chair, members of RDC, I emailed out the link for the PowerPoint presentation. It is a large file, that was shared via link from, Microsoft OneDrive. I'll try to share it on my computer. Let's see if I can bring it up.
This is Jill Grant. I think I could do it if you're not able to.
Jill Grant, you are granted access to provide screen share for the PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, it's a large file, unfortunately. Okay, there.
Did that
Here.
come up?
Yes,
It
ma'am.
did. Okay, let me go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Resources and Development Committee, and your staff, and those on the call, including Navajo Nation EPA, Mr. Roan, Mr. Atsidi, and others. I am Dareth Watchman Moore. I serve as trustee for the Phase 2 Expanded Trust. I have been in this role since 2017, having been selected by the Navajo Nation and the United States to serve in this role. The trust is a nonprofit entity recognized by the Internal Revenue Service and also recognized by the Navajo Tax Commission. My office is located in Navajo, New Mexico, my hometown, just north of Window Rock. So this presentation is work in progress. I know that we are going to present additional information at the end of this month in the work session with the committee, Madam Chair. I also understand that you had a preview of the abandoned uranium mine work across the Navajo Nation. And the trust is a small part of the overall work that's being conducted. I believe there's 523 abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Nation, and I am addressing but 47 of that universe, Madam Chair. So I'm going to really quickly go over an introduction and history and background, what the trust does, what we do, and the financial commitments that bring the trust and Navajo EPA before the committee today. This slide here is a slide of the abandoned uranium mines across the Navajo Nation. You have mining districts in the Monument Valley area. You have mining districts in the Red Mesa, Sweetwater, Shiprock area, and you have a mining district in the Chinle area, and then towards Cameron, that's another mining district. The mines of the trust are scattered throughout these districts, and as I mentioned, I have 47 of them that I am addressing with the United States and the Navajo Nation through US EPA and Navajo EPA. So you heard from US EPA and the Navajo EPA yesterday that the Navajo Nation sued or attempted to sue the United States for mines that were called orphan mines. And as a result of that action between the Navajo Nation and the United States government, there were 2 settlements between the 2 governments known as the parties. The first settlement was in 2015, and that was the Phase 1 settlement. And the second settlement was in 2016, and that was the Phase 2 trust. And officially, the Phase 2 trust was established in 2017, specifically on September 12th. And that's when my work began. So the Phase 2 settlement agreement, there's one agreement. Attached to that agreement are 3 addendums. There's a 4th one pending to address 16 of the total mine sites that I have. But you'll see in this this slide here that the Phase 2 settlement between the United States and the Navajo Nation was effected on July 13, 2016. There were 3 addendums that identify the mines that I mentioned. And so the first set of mines, I was made aware on September 12th. That was my first day of work. February 14, 2020 was the second set of sites, and addendum 2, that was 17 additional sites and water studies. And addendum 3 was last year on February 9th, and that particular addendum added 2 more sites and then merged 3 sites from the first addendum into 1 site. The phase 2 expanded trust agreement was signed, and there's a typo there, but that should have been February 14, 2022. And this trust agreement, you'll see the key takeaways from the settlement agreement into the trust agreement, that it created the expanded trust, merging the RSC trust that I signed in 2017 and the phase 2 orphan trust. That trust is known as the cleanup trust. So again, we'll go into more of the specifics and the language in the settlement agreement as well as the trust agreement at the end of this month. But the phase 2 settlement agreement between the United States and the Navajo Nation prescribes the work that I do. So this slide here identifies my role and responsibilities in the phase 2 trust as trustee. I have an office in Navajo. I administer the funds in my office. I have full-time staff that work in the office with me. I also hire other individuals who are Navajo as independent contractors in the community relations area. That is Mr. Derek Slick and Ms. Felicia Adams. I also have an environmental advisement group. You'll see the names listed there. I have legal counsel based out of Santa Fe, New Mexico, Montgomery and Andrews law firm. And Randy Valverde is the trust counsel. And I have currently 2 prime environmental consultants. WSP is performing the water study work as well as the removal site evaluation work. And I have a pending contract with a second contractor, Parsons, and they will perform the engineering evaluation and cost analysis for the trust. And so this particular slide just outlines my responsibilities to the United States and the Navajo Nation and the work that I do as oversight and fiduciary management of the trust, the phase 2 trust. This slide here, Madam Chair and members of the committee, just outlines a reporting structure, if you will. You'll see the phase 2 trust in the middle in turquoise. It is a nonprofit organization, as mentioned. You'll see the the regulatory agencies above the trust, that is the Navajo Nation Environmental Protection Agency and the US EPA. They serve as beneficiaries to the settlement agreement between the Navajo Nation and the United States. And a big part of this process is collaborating with the community. So the individuals that I hire in the blocks in green, they serve to assist me communicating with the respective communities. We go to chapter meetings, we have special events, and we also are out there conducting field activities. However, I will qualify that during the 2 years of the pandemic, we were now not out in the field. And so this year we plan to be out in the field. In fact, we are out in the Touchy Blue Gap area as of last Wednesday, installing some water sampling equipment. So this is essentially the structure of the phase 2 trust. This slide here, Madam Chair, members of the committee, we implement a process called Superfund. This is a modified Superfund process, and you'll see this particular figure is multicolored. And so to the left is the assessment phase. And so the 30 removal site evaluations are being conducted in this phase and 2 water studies. Then you move into the middle part of this figure, Madam Chair, is the decision-making phase, and I have up to 16 abandoned uranium mines that come from the first settlement. And so those up to 16 mines will be undergoing this process here. And this process does take a while. And so you heard that I started the initial sites and the initial work in 2017, and I do not plan on being completed until 2027. And so it is a long process that entails document preparation, work plan preparation, field plan preparation, quality document preparation, approval by both Navajo EPA and US EPA. And so this is the Superfund process that the trust is implementing. Moving forward, I mentioned the decision-making phase of up to 16 sites. Those sites are identified in the figure on the left, and you'll see a map on the right that shows where they're located. They're located in the areas in pink, the areas in purple, yellow, and light green, and there's 3 of them in the Eastern Agency as well. And so this work has just started, and it's a 3-year effort, and I do plan to be completed with this work by 2027. So this next slide here, Madam Chair, just shows the chapters where the trust is working. 15 chapters are served by the work that I do. And so we take a lot of time introducing ourselves, especially to the new abandoned uranium mines that we're evaluating and conducting engineering analysis and cost reviews. And so just notify or letting you know the chapters that we're in. Moving on to the next slide. Just the chapters that I mentioned and the communities that I mentioned where the abandoned uranium mines are working on. This particular chart just identifies that in the Cameron area, Western is 20%, 26% of my sites. The central AUM, that's around the Chinle area. I have 14 sites, that's 30% of my sites. 6%, 3 sites in the Eastern Agency. Northern AUM, as mentioned, that would be the Tseta area, Red Mesa area, 14, and then you'll see the other 2 slivers take up the rest of my sites, my abandoned uranium mines.
Oh,
Moving into the issue of today and the end of the month is the financial commitments that the settlement agreements and the trust agreements outline. So the players in this effort are the U.S. Treasury, from which the trust fund of the Phase 2 trust receives its initial funding. So this is a breakdown of the costs and the funds provided by U.S. Treasury. And so the agreements outline the financial commitments of both parties here. So the U.S. Treasury provides 100% of the administrative costs and the future oversight costs. So those costs include my salary and running the office of the Phase 2 trust, and the future oversight costs pay for the oversight salaries of both US EPA and Navajo EPA personnel. The U.S. Treasury also is to provide 100% of the estimated cost to perform the current work that I'm undertaking. That includes the removal site evaluation investigations, the 2 water studies, and all the work in Addendum 1 of the settlement agreement, Phase 2 settlement agreement. The U.S. Treasury also pays 100% the cost to perform the water study in Addendum 2. And 75% of the cost to perform the RSC work in the addendums 2, 3, and 75% of the estimated cost to perform any actions that are identified in that middle phase. And these removal actions are what we might call cleanup actions. And then, of course, the U.S. Treasury will pay for 100% of the costs of that middle area of the figure in the Superfund process for the engineering evaluations and cost analysis of up to 16 sites, abandoned uranium mines that were worked on in phase 1. And these costs will be realized in an addendum 4, which is pending. Navajo EPA, in their agreement to the phase 2 settlement agreement, the Navajo EPA, Navajo Nation has a commitment to 25% of the estimated cost to perform the work. And in order to complete the work, the trust fund is going to rely upon Navajo EPA to provide 25% of the cost, and then again to be reimbursed somewhere down the road by the U.S. Treasury. So I'm here today with Navajo EPA to discuss the financial commitments. Again, we'll go into more detail. But Jill, did I hear you?
Ms. Watchman-Moore? Ms. Watchman-Moore?
Yes.
If I may interject, but your 20 minutes is up, and I'm just wanting to know how much more time would you like to or finish out your presentation?
Okay. I would say give me this slide and one more slide, and then Ms. Grant has a comment.
Honorable members of Resources and Development Committee, I would recommend another 5 minutes to have EPA finish out their presentation. Do I get a vote on that? May I get a consensus to allow an additional 5 minutes to the Waste Regulatory and Compliance Department to finish out their presentation? Honorable Vice Chair? Yes? Yeah. Honorable Claw?
Fine.
Okay. Honorable Nez?
Only 5 minutes. 5 minutes is fine.
With that, Ms. Watchman-Moore, you are granted an additional 5 minutes to complete and conclude your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quickly, Ms. Grant, you want to make a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure everyone was clear that the United States is paying 100% of everything, but they prepay certain amounts. That's where the trust gets its initial funding from. So where it says they're just paying 75% and Navajo is paying 25%, that's just the cost that they're paying for upfront. So that's who the trust goes to get their funds. They would go to the United States for 75% of them and Navajo for 25%. But then Navajo eventually will be reimbursed by the United States for the remaining 25%. It's just not immediate.
Thank you, Jill. Yeah, so I think the work session will explain all of that in a little bit more detail, but this slide is provided to show the prepay costs upfront. The last slide is the reason for the fund transfer request, which will eventually formally come to the committee and the council. In my trust agreement, there is a clause in that agreement that identifies the funding that I am requesting from Navajo EPA, and that amount is $514,456.87. And so there is a breakdown in the 3 bullets following this request. And so Navajo EPA and the trust will be pursuing this transfer per this legal trust agreement. And then in the second item here, a future request for the 25% of the cost of this work to be completed by 2027. That'll come from the Navajo Nation EPA as well. I don't have a final amount, but, and that's something we'll discuss at the end of the month. But here again, as Ms. Grant has said, 100% of the costs for the work of the trust will be paid eventually by the United States Treasury. Madam Chair, this is my real brief presentation. I apologize for going over, but I do look forward to the work session at the end of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watchman Moore for that presentation, and also to Ms. Grant for the presentation as well. And again, members of Resources and Development Committee, may I get a motion to accept the report? Vice Chair Johnson, may I get a second? Claw, second. Honorable Claw, thank you. Members of Resources and Development Committee, do we have any questions, comments, and/or recommendations on the report that was given by Waste Regulatory and Compliance Department, and also Ms. Watchman Moore and Ms. Jill Grant? Honorable Simpson.
Just right quick, it's a recommendation, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of RDC. Delegates are listening, and the Zoom guests, and Delegate Crowley, thank you. I'm sure this is a recommendation. I know we talked about all these things that will be happening on this, uranium mines. But, we hear these presentations, and I think we really need to, as RDC, because we have oversight, sites accomplish, and what's going to be forthcoming in the next maybe 5 or 10 years. Okay. I'd like to go out there and see what work has been done and what's going to be done later on. So as a site visit, because I think we went maybe 4 or 5 of them, but that indicate, Madam Chair, if that can be done.
Okay.
Know what we're facing, what we have to work on. Sitting here in this, at this meeting here, we're not seeing what they're actually doing out there, and do some site visits. Madam Chair, that's my recommendation. Thank you.
Agoshin Ashaha, Honorable Simpson. And as it was mentioned here by my colleague, that the request, just to visually assess as Resources and Development Committee members, to conduct on-site visits, at least to 4 or 5 mines was recommended, but at this point, I'd like to go ahead and give it to our legislative staff. Mr. Tahi?
Madam Chair, members of RDC, yes, scheduling a site visit to these abandoned uranium mines is in the work. However, due to the weather conditions, we had to wait until it's starting to warm up. So as it's starting to warm up, I'll work with all the entities that are responsible for these AUMs, so this way we can plan out a schedule site tour of all the sites that you're requesting. Madam Chair, members already see that's my response.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tahi. So apparently it has been already on radar for RDC members to, along with Mr. Tahi and the assistance of EPA, to go and conduct some site visits later on as weather permits. So eventually that will be coming down the pipe. So with that, any other questions or comments, members of Resources and Development Committee? Going once, going twice, 3 times. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and call for a roll call vote. Honorable Claw, how do you vote? I vote green. Thank you. And Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote, sir? Okay, go on to Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Okay, Honorable So is excused. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote? With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we do have 3 in favor, 0 opposed, and Chair not voting. Motion carries. And thank you, representatives from EPA regarding the updates on the Phase 2 trust, and we will be looking forward to the legislation that will be dropped for transfer of those monies from Phase 1 unexpended funds to Phase 2, if that is requested. And again, thank you and have yourselves a great afternoon. I'd like to go ahead and take it on to item 6 on the agenda, old business, where we do have none. Going on to item number 7 on the agenda, new business. I do have, letter A, legislation number 0047-23. And if I could have Mr. Tahi read the legislation into the record.
Madam Chair, members of RDC, you have legislative summary sheet for tracking number 0047-23, date March 29, 2023, titled the Resolution Proposed Navajo Nation Council Resolution, an action relating to resource and economic development and upkeep committees, confirming the appointment of Tico Charlie as the Executive Director for the Office of Navajo Communications Regulatory Commission. The purpose of this resolution is to confirm Tico Charlie as the Executive Director of the Navajo Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. The nominating committee has final authority over this legislation, which we read into the record in its entirety. The primary sponsor of this legislation is Honorable Danny Simpson for legislation number 0047-23, an action relating to resource and economic development and update committees, confirming the appointment of Tico Charlie as the Executive Director for the Office of Navajo Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. And Section 1 outlines the authority, and Section 2 the findings, which includes an Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C, and Section 3 to confirm the appointment. Attaches Exhibit A, which is a letter dated January 10, 2023, regarding the appointment of NNTRC Executive Director. Attaches Exhibit B, which is a letter of interest from Mr. Tico Charlie, and attaches Exhibit C, which is his resume. Then you have the first report, the Navajo Nation Legislative Action and Public Review Summary for legislation number 0047-23. This legislation was posted on March 31st, 2023 at 8:47 p.m. The 5-day comment period ended April 5th, 2022. There was no comments supporting this legislation, no comments opposing this legislation, no comments or recommendations on this legislation. Madam Chair, members of RDC, that is legislation number 0047-23 read into the record. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Tahi. Again, members of RDC, may I get a motion on legislation 0047-23?
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and make a motion, but I make a motion, to suspend the floor rules and to add items A, B, C, and D, all legislations pertaining to confirmation into one consent agenda.
Members of Resources and Development Committee, Mr. Honorable Rodney Tahi, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, members of RDC, for legislation number 0047, there needs to be amendment, regarding the title. We need to strike out economics from the title. In addition, the first motion is for legislation only 004723. We can do the consent agenda after legislation 0047-23 is, since there's already a motion on this legislation.
Honorable Simpson.
Madam Chair, thank you, Mr. Tahi, for your recommendation, but, the motion parties can actually withdraw their motion, then we go into putting these into consent agenda. That's the way it can be done.
Okay, so, with that, I'd like to take it back to Honorable Claw. Would you like to go ahead and withdraw your motion and also go back into what you had recommended in consent agenda?
Yes, I will go ahead and withdraw my motion and go back into adding all of the items listed, including legislation 0047-23, which is item A, B, C, D, all the confirmations into one consent agenda.
So there is a motion on the floor right now to suspend the floor rules for consent agenda on legislation number 0047-23, 0048-23, 0055-23, 0061-23. Okay.
And 50.
005523, that's $2 million supplemental. And also legislation 0055-23. May I get a second? Honorable Vice Chair Johnson. Rodney Taki, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, members of RDC, 0052-23 was a legislation that was already addressed by Resource and Development Committee. The Resource and Development Committee tabled this legislation. So Resource and Development already addressed that legislation.
Mr. Tahi, for corrections, it's 005523.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the motioning party had a motion. We had a second by Vice Chair Johnson. Honorable Simpson?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the RDC. I'd like to request to include legislation 005023 into the consent agenda. This is reference to approving $2 billion from the reserve funds for summer youth employment. 50.
Oh, 50. Where is my new agenda here? Right here. So for the record, Resources and Development Committee members, there was a request to suspend for floor rules to do a consent agenda on legislation 0047-23, 0048-23, 0055-23, and 0061-23, and legislation number 0052-23. And we do have a motion with a seconding party of Vice Chair Honorable Johnson. So with that, members of our Resources and Development Committee, do we have any questions on these legislations that were put on consent agenda? Honorable Vice Chair Johnson?
Yeah, let's go to include all the legislation.
Okay, would that be an amendment?
Madam Chair, members of RDC, sir, suspending the floor rules will only take us to legislation. We would need to amend the approved agenda to have a consent agenda, so this will be the second approved agenda, to include legislation 0047-23, 004823, 005523, 006123, 005023, 005823, 005923, part of the consent agenda. So the suspension of the floor rules only applies to making, addressing the agenda or moving things around. But to do the consent agenda, you would need to make an amendment to the already approved agenda, so that way we'll reissue a second approved agenda.
Request to speak, Delegate Nez.
Honorable Rick Nez, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tahi, Madam Chair, and the motioning parties. Perhaps you could just request a modification to make that clarification on what Mr. Tahi had stated to Honorable Claw and Honorable Johnson, and to just have their motion and second in place for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Nez. I'd like to go ahead and give it to our legal counsel, Ms. Khan, for clarification.
Chair, members of the Resources and Development Committee, with regard to the consent agenda, again, Ms. Bobroff has spoken to, FAQs, frequently asked questions about, subjects such as this idea of the consent agenda. And more clarification will come with that document. However, we have a request for a consent agenda. Agenda setting was done at the very beginning, how you started your meeting. There's a place in the agenda where you set your agenda. So at this point, I agree with what Mr. Rodney Tahi has described, as this is an amendment to the agenda. And it is also technically a suspension of the floor rules, but it's most tied to the agenda setting. And it's, at a standing committee, to change the agenda is just a majority vote as opposed to council. So it would just take a majority vote to amend the agenda documents that,
Thank you, Ms. Khan, for that clarification. So going back to the motioning party, Honorable Claw, the recommendation here is just a majority vote to amend the agenda to include all of the legislation numbers that was named, 0047, 0048, 0055, 0061, 0050, 0058, and 0059. So with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, Honorable Claw, you had motion, so I just need your concurrence to do consent agenda, right? Consent agenda.
Madam Chair, I concur.
Okay, and then also to the seconding party was Honorable Vice Chair Johnson. Okay, so with that, members of Resources and Development Committee, I do need a majority vote to amend the agenda to do consent agenda with all the legislations that was named here. Honorable Shauna Claw, how do you vote?
I vote green, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Casey Johnson votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Yeah. And Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Yeah. And Honorable Otto So is excused. With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we do have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and chair not voting, making a amendment to accept all the legislations on the agenda from legislation number 0047 through 0059. With that, any questions on any of these legislations that is here before us, members of Resources and Development Committee? Going.
Motion by
Okay.
Delegate Rick Nez.
Motion by Delegate Rick Naz, and may I get a second? Vice Chair Johnson, thank you. With that, members, any questions or comments? Going once, going twice, 3 times, let's go ahead and call for roll call vote. Honorable Shauna Claw, how do you vote?
I vote green, Madam Chair.
Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Vice Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Nez, how do you vote?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Honorable So is excused. With that, members, we have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and chair not voting. And motion carries with the acceptance of all the legislation on the agenda here. Going down to item number, letter I, under new business, approving a work session with the Waste Regulatory and Compliance Department for Friday, April 28, 2023 at 9 a.m. in the Window Rock, Arizona area to discuss the Phase 2 trust. Members of Resources and Development Committee, may I get a motion on this item?
Donna Claw, I'll make the motion.
Honorable Claw makes the motion. May I get a second?
I second those.
Vice Chair Johnson, do we have any questions on this particular work session request, members of RDC? Going once, going twice, 3 times. So with that, members of Resources Development Committee, I'd like to go ahead and call for vote. Honorable, Claw, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Shahat, and then Honorable Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote?
Chair Johnson votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Rick Nez, how do you vote?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Honorable So is excused. With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and chairs not voting. On to item number 8 of the agenda, close of meeting. First, I'd like to request if there are any announcements from members of Resources Development Committee or Legislative Services.
I have a announcement, Madam Chair.
Honorable Claw.
Yes, Madam Chair, and honorable delegates here in person and on the call, and then those in attendance today. I want to thank you for being on the call with us and also being a part of the RDC meeting today. I just want to extend an invitation to everyone on the call and here in the meeting to be a part of our joint prayer event, which is hosted by 25th Navajo Nation Council in the Office of the President and Vice President. We will be hosting the event at the Veterans Memorial Park on Monday, April 17, and this is to kick off the event and to commemorate the services of our active duty military personnel. And so we open that to the public and we invite everyone to attend. We do have an agenda, and that will be shared with the Office of the Speaker as well as Office of the President and Vice President. And then we also have our spring session, and we welcome for visitors to come and sit in the gallery. And that's my announcement, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Hagoshi Akaha, thank you, Honorable Claw, in regards to the announcement regarding that joint prayer event that you were able to schedule in collaboration with Office of the President and Vice President and Legislative Branch. Shahat, any other members of Resources and Development Committee with any announcements at this time? If not, we will go ahead and call for adjournment. May I get a motion? Vice Chair Johnson, may I get a second?
Donna Claw, second.
Honorable Claw. With that, members, I would like to go ahead and call for a roll call vote. Honorable Claw, how do you vote?
I vote green, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Vice Chair Johnson, how do you vote, sir?
Vice Chair Casey Johnson votes green.
Thank you. Honorable Nez, how do you vote, sir?
Delegate Rick Nez votes green.
Thank you. And Honorable Simpson, how do you vote?
Green, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Honorable So is excused. With that, members of Resources and Development Committee, we have 4 in favor, 0 opposed, and chair not voting, and we adjourn at 12:42 p.m. And you all have yourselves a great day, and God bless you, and be safe out there, relatives, across the Navajo Nation and listeners on the call. Thank you.